Hello and welcome back to Football Daily, where today we are bringing you something a little bit different. A rundown of 10 clubs that are surprisingly rich. Let's get into it. 10. Bristol City. Name the richest clubs in England and we highly doubt that Bristol City would be anywhere near the top of your list. And yet their owner Stephen Lansdown is worth £1.72 billion. Just 180 million less than Everton's Farhad Moshiri. But whilst the Toffees have spent £380 million since the beginning of 2017-18 and are currently being managed by Carlo Ancelotti, the Robins have only finished in the Championship playoff places once this century. However, things do seem to be changing in the West Country. Manager Lee Johnson has reinvested the £33 million they made on selling Webster and Kelly to Brighton and Bournemouth respectively to bring in Callas, De Silva and Palmer from Chelsea, complementing their existing roster which includes Ashley Williams, Benik Afobe and Andy Weimann. A run of 4 wins in their last 5 games has seen them rise to 7th, just 3 points off second place Leeds. This means that it isn't outside the realms of possibility that this wealthy club could return to the top tier for the first time in 40 years this May. 9. LA Galaxy. It's perhaps less surprising that a club that's been represented by the likes of David Beckham, Ashley Cole, Steven Gerrard and Zlatan Ibrahimovic would have a fair bit of financial backing behind it. But the extent to LA Galaxy owner Philip Anschut's fortune is truly mind-blowing. As of October 2019, Forbes ranked the billionaire businessman and prominent climate change denier as the 41st richest person in the US, with an estimated wealth of $11.5 billion. Currently, the benefactor of LA Galaxy, the Lakers, the Kings, the Staples Centre and the O2 in London, it's clear that Anschutz is one of the most important owners in world sports. But for all his investment in the Galaxy down the years, the recent return of just one MLS Cup in the last 7 years is pretty disappointing, especially when you consider they spent over $14 million to have Zlatan represent them for 2 years. Having only once got past the CONCACAF Champions League quarterfinals during his time in charge, it remains to be seen whether the 80-year-old Anschutz will live to see his side conquer the region's biggest club tournament. 8. Aston Villa. After failing to secure promotion to the Premier League in 17-18 after losing in the playoff final, Villa's then owner, Tony Xia, realising they were in financial difficulty, sought additional investment. 2 months later and the NSWE group, led by Egyptian Nassef Sawiris and American Wes Edens, bought a 55% controlling stake in the club, with Sawiris taking over as club chairman. But this isn't just any standard takeover, with Edens valued at £803 million and Sawiris a massive $5 billion. To put that into context, that makes him the 5th richest owner in the Premier League, with a net worth of £1.4 billion more than the Glazers. And Sawiris has certainly made an impact at Villa Park, with 4 of the club's 5 record signings arriving since the end of the 18-19 campaign. But having won just 3 of their last 12 Premier League games and conceded a joint league high 47 goals in 25 games, unless the Villains are careful, they could soon have the richest owner in the Championship. 7. Tottenham Hotspur. Despite spending a record £1 billion on their new 62,000-seater stadium, one commonly considered as one of the best in the world, Spurs have a reputation as one of the tightest in the top 6. Since the start of the 16-17 season, Spurs have spent just £318 million on signings, £84 million less than the next lowest in the top 6 Liverpool, and just £8 million more than West Ham. That puts their achievements under Pochettino of 1 second-place finish, 3 domestic semi-finals and a Champions League final appearance in that time firmly into perspective. But in reality, until they had to save for their new stadium, the Lily Whites didn't need to be so miserly. Their 83-year-old owner Joe Lewis is the main investor in Tavistock Group, which formerly owned stakes in Rangers and Slavia Prague, but now through the ENIC Group controls 85% of Spurs. According to the Sunday Times Rich List in 2019, this Bahamas-based businessman is worth £4.35 billion and is the 5th richest British person. With Spurs having only ever spent over £30 million on 3 players in their history, in Ndombele, Sanchez and Sissoko, Mourinho will no doubt try and persuade Lewis and Levy to loosen the purse strings this summer. 6. Barnsley. Having spent just 1 season, the 97-98 campaign, in their 130-year history in the top tier of English football, it's fair to say that Barnsley is far from a traditional footballing powerhouse. And they haven't had much to shout about recently either, spending 3 of the last 6 seasons scrapping in League One. But off the pitch, life looks surprisingly rosy for the Tykes. In December 2017, halfway through a season they would eventually finish 22nd in the Championship, their lifelong supporter and owner of 14 years, Patrick Crine, decided to sell the club. In his stead, Barnsley are now run by a consortium led by Chian Lee, Grace Hung and Paul Conway. They are supported by Indian investor Nirav Parekh and Billy Bean, the legendary baseball coach depicted in in the film Moneyball. Combined, these 5 investors have a net worth of $9.1 billion, only topped by Abramovich and Sheikh Mansour in England. But they're currently bottom of the championship, 9 points from safety, so it'll be intriguing to see how long they remain as investors. 5. Benfica. Despite winning 5 of the last 6 Primeira Liga titles, 37-time Portuguese champions Benfica have generally struggled in European competition, only twice getting out of the Champions League group stages in the last 7 years. And it's not like they've been much better in Europe's secondary competition either. Since finishing as back-to-back Europa League runners-up in 2013 and 2014, they haven't got past the quarter-final stage. But despite that, the Eagles have consistently punched above their weight financially, finishing in the top 30 in the world in terms of revenue in 9 of the last 10 years. In 2019, they were ranked as the 24th richest club in the world, pulling in just shy of €197 million in revenue, 100 million more than they did back in 2011. Despite playing in a league ranked as the 6th best by UEFA, Benfica are pulling in just €3 million less than Leicester City, who won the Premier League just 3.5 years ago, and 2 million less than Ajax, who reached the Champions League semi-finals last campaign. That is pretty impressive for a club that routinely loses their top talent, with £494 million worth of players leaving the Lisbon-based side since the start of 2016-17. 4. Schalke. Amongst the top 20 clubs in the Deloitte Money League are the traditional heavyweights and newly wealthy sides such as Atletico Madrid, Inter Milan and Everton. But sneaking in amongst them at 15th, above clubs such as Roma, Napoli and Lyon, are Schalke. Despite finishing in the top 4 just 10 times this century, Schalke have now placed in the Money League top 20 for 17 consecutive editions. In 2019, revenue at the club surpassed €300 million for the first time, with the club back in the Champions League, after Tedesco's side surpassed all expectations to finish second in the Bundesliga in 17-18. This has meant that the gap to their nearest domestic rivals, Borussia Dortmund, has been reduced to its lowest level since 2013-14 in €52 million. Their revenue has been boosted by the launching of their live streaming service, Schalke TV, and stability brought by their €150 million deal with Gazprom, which extends until 2022. Just one win in their last 6 league games has seen them drop 4 points behind 4th place Gladbach, but their rosy financial situation means it certainly won't derail their short-term future if they do miss out. 3. Shakhtar Donetsk. There's wealthy, and then there's Shakhtar owner Rinat Akhmetov. Founder of steel company System Capital Management, which currently has a massive $23 billion in assets, Akhmetov's personal wealth touched $5.9 billion in 2018. With a shady past and rumoured links to organised crimes, Akhmetov is your stereotypical dodgy football owner. And it's fair to say that being run by this slightly suspect billionaire hasn't held back the club. Domestic champions in 8 of the last 10 seasons, it's fair to say Shakhtar have had a monopoly on Ukrainian football. But it's not like they're simply buying the league, they are fantastic talent developers. Their extensive scouting network, particularly in Brazil, saw them bring in Fernandinho, Willian, Douglas Costa, Teixeira and Mkhitaryan for a combined £37.7 million, and sell them on for a £126 million profit. To put that into context, their closest rivals Dynamo Kiev have only made £140 million on all player sales over the last 9 years. Currently 14 points above Dynamo in the table, and having missed out on the Champions League knockout place to Atalanta, their next target will surely be a first UCL quarter-final in 10 years in 2021. 2. Seattle Sounders. It's perhaps unsurprising that the current MLS Cup champion Seattle Sounders are reasonably well off, but the extent to their wealth is truly staggering. Their ownership group is composed of 3 owners and 11 other families. The majority owner is ex-Cambridge United shareholder Adrian Hanauer, who has been involved with the Sounders since their 2009 inception into the MLS. He and former Disney chairman and film producer Joe Roth managed to bring comedian Drew Murray into the fold alongside Microsoft co-founder and Seattle Seahawks owner Paul Allen. Childhood friends with Bill Gates, Allen was instrumental in sparking the computer revolution of the 70s and 80s, and was ranked as the 44th wealthiest person in the world by Forbes in 2018, with an estimated $20.3 billion net worth at the time of his death in October 2018. With his sister Jodie Allen, manager of his estate, now assuming his position as owner, Seattle Sounders have access to one of the wealthiest families on the planet. 1. Fulham. Back in July 2013, Fulham owner and chairman Mohamed Al Fayed ended his 16-year stint in charge of the Whites. He had overseen the club's transition from the 3rd tier to the Premier League, where they had stayed for the previous 12 seasons and had an unlikely run to the Europa League final in 2010. But in a deal worth between £150 and £200 million, Al Fayed sold to billionaire car parts entrepreneur and Jacksonville Jaguars owner Shahid Khan. Having initially been excited about the takeover, the Cottage faithful have been left pretty disappointed with the results, with the side spending 5 of the last 7 seasons in the Championship. But that's certainly not down to a lack of effort on Khan's part. In 18-19, they spent £105 million on new signings, only to finish 10 points from safety. And they've spent £120 million across the other 6 seasons, or £20 million a year. That, in the context of the Championship, is an enormous amount of money, with Derby spending an average of £11.6 million a season and Leeds just £8.3 million on average across those 7 campaigns. With so little return on his investment, it will be interesting to see whether Khan takes his £5.4 billion bank account, the 7th biggest in English football, elsewhere in the coming years. That was 10 surprisingly rich football clubs. Hope you enjoyed the list. If there are any you think we missed out on and should have spoken about, stick them down in the comments below. And as ever, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Football Daily, and we'll see you next time.